Hey gang, this is part 2 in the gas-powered trike video, and if you saw the first video, you saw where I cut up a couple of bikes, bought some pieces and wheels and different things, and butchered it down into what you see right here. If you haven't seen that first video, I suggest you go back and check it out. Now what I started with was basically the drive mechanism from a three-wheeled tricycle, adult size, utility type tricycle or trike. And I modified everything. You have to look at what I did, because this tube right here, this down tube, was actually going the other direction on the original bike. And if you look, this is the neck where the forks went through. So try to picture that flipped over. And the front half is a 20-inch bicycle that I bought for scrap. And back here, normally this would have been a lot taller with tall spoke wheels and a basket to carry stuff. But it's going to have an engine right there. So I've got a drive sprocket, basically a bicycle style drive sprocket. This is my drive wheel. This is the free wheel. And up here I have what was the inspiration for all of this, and this may or may not work. I'm just experimenting. If it works, great. If it doesn't, I'll move on to a bigger engine. But I have this little gas engine that started off as an edger that was at Lowe's, and it was damaged. At least the framework was damaged, but this little engine runs. The conflict I had was the rotation. This actually rotates this direction, and I had visions of putting this on a bicycle, but because of that rotation I would have to put the engine the other side and put a jack shaft and bring the chain link back across. It just kind of didn't make sense for what I wanted to do, and I decided, well, I can put it anywhere I want on a tricycle. So that's how this got started. At this point I've dismantled the edger. Over there is the base for the edger, and you can see that front section's all bent. This is all the scrap stuff from the two bikes that I had, and I picked this up. This is an old lawnmower seat, and I may use it as is. I haven't decided yet, but if nothing else, it gives me a structure that I can build and have a seat on this thing, because the seat's going to sit above the engine. So I will say this: the edger was a belt drive, had a serpentine system on it, and obviously I need a sprocket. I did go and buy a chain at Walmart the other day, so I have a chain to use. And then this. Now this was the drive sprocket on the back wheel of the little 20-inch bike, and I had to cut it up to get it loose. A bunch of little bearings fell out, stuff that doesn't matter. But really I just wanted the sprocket. Now I don't even know if this is going to work. Again, you know, if you had a centrifugal clutch on a go-kart engine, it has a smaller sprocket than this. So I'm just gonna have to guess as to what the ratio is going to be, or if it's going to work at all. But the point is, I needed a sprocket. So what I'm going to do, and I can show you this in more detail when I get to that, is I'm going to weld. I took this washer and I ground the edge of it down slightly so that it would fit inside of the framework of that sprocket. And then, if all goes well, I'm going to take this off. This will come off of this clutch. I'm going to weld this on to this clutch and hopefully get it centered right, and that'll give me the drive mechanism for the chain. So hopefully I can get that to work. And then I just need to take probably some of the structure from the edger, because the only mount point on this edger or this engine is these 3 screws that held it to the main plate on the edger frame. There's no other real mounts on this thing, and so I'm going to have to just, I'm just going to have to get creative on that. But when I get to that point, I'll show you. But this is part 2. Okay, so to get started with this, I need to take apart the clutch. You'll notice that spins freely as it's designed to do, and I'll show you how this works actually when I take it apart. So this number 20 Torx bit, I'm going to put it in center there and remove that and not lose the screw. That's all it takes. And this has some little shim washers that go on the shaft. Don't want to lose those. So I'm going to put the screw back in so I don't lose it. And I want to explain how this works. This is a centrifugal clutch, basically. That's what it's called. And how that works is when the engine spools up and gets up to speed really fast, these two pieces, which are held together by these springs, help if I zoom in a little bit. But these two pieces are like weights, you know, and almost like brake shoes, really. And they're held together with these two springs. Well, with the inertia of spinning, it forces this out, and these surfaces will then bind or try to bind onto the inner surface of this piece. And then of course this has the drive mechanism, which in this case is that serpentine belt. So that would spin, or spin up to speed and flare out. These pieces catch on this and try to get it spinning. Now, the only problem with any of this is designed for edging grass. It's not designed to carry a person on a bicycle. So the reality is this may not be strong enough, and the engine may not be strong enough either. So if that's the case, I'll move on. I'll get a bigger engine and still build this thing. But I want to experiment with this one. So I'm going to attach, like I said, the sprocket onto this piece, and that's going to give me my drive mechanism. But again, being that this is going to be underpowered, probably what I'll have to do is get my feet going and give it some gas and hope that it catches and goes. So as I was saying with the sprocket, it'll have this washer welded on, make it a solid piece, and I'll probably weld it on the inside. And the reason for that is the chain has to ride on the outside, so any welding on this perimeter could be a conflict, so I don't really want to do that, and it'll be easy to just lay some welds on the inside. And then ideally, if I can figure out a way to do it without causing problems, I'm going to center this as best I can on this exterior piece and weld it to that piece, and probably just go around this perimeter on this edge here, because I may do it here. I don't know yet. I haven't decided. If there was one option I had thought of, and that was to drill some holes in 4 locations across from each other, and when I got this together I could weld through the holes and fill them up and make it look nice. But I'll figure that out when I get to that point. How about that? Okay, so this is going to be the easy part. What I've done actually is taken a smaller washer and set that down on this piece of metal, and I've got a clamp from my ground to the bare metal. And the reason I put this washer here is because the washer that I'm using actually sits a little below flush in the sprocket. So if I tried to just set it there upside down, it could slide out. So this is what I'm going to do, is set that on top of that, and that's going to help maintain a pressure on it. And now I'm going to get the welder ready. And like I said, I'm going to weld inside. I know it's going to be hard to see, but That'll work. Alright, so the washer's welded in, and I think I'm going to drill those holes that I talked about. That might be my simpler approach. So I've crisscrossed some lines, and I did the teeth on this is 14, so I used 2 high points straight across and the opposing low points. Just worked out. I don't know if you can tell, but I've been drilling stuff for so long that I can sense by the sound as to when it's ready to break through to the other side. Kind of odd, I think. See there, I started easing off because I could feel it and hear it. That comes from drilling thousands and thousands of holes. Now, what I'll probably do is step those up a little bit, because that's just kind of small for welding. So I'll make those a little bit larger and go from there. Now to do that, I'm going to use one of these handy little step drills from Harbor Freight. Same thing, just go through it. I only have so much room until the tip starts to get to the bottom there. Yeah, that's what happens when your bit's a little bit dull and you're trying to force it. So I'll have to see if I have a sharper one and follow up. Well, that's a start. I feel like I've got it centered pretty well. I've started with a couple little welds, and I don't want to get this too hot. So I'm going to just take my time with it. I'm not going to film this part, but I'm going to plug those in slowly and make this as solid as I can. I may still come out to the outside and put in just a few little tacks just to hold it, but at this point I want to get these filled in. Like I said, I'm just doing a little bit at a time because there's actually a grease, there's a set of roller bearings in there that are greased, and I don't want to overheat that and cause problems. So there it is, all welded together, and I did put those little tacks in 4 locations. Doesn't have to be pretty, just has to function. So slip that on there, get that nut started. Alright, so this is the edger base that I took the engine off of. And I'm going to use this plate because it has the mount point for the engine. So basically, no big deal. I'm just going to remove all this hardware and start downsizing this until I get the size that I need, or the shape that I want to make it work. So that'll be fairly simple. And the other thing I need to do is loosen up the pulley, or the sprocket, I'm sorry, and slide it over this way so that it is as far over as I can get it without touching the main housing, and that way I can adjust the engine. The engine's not going to be centered, and that's okay. It'll be slightly offset, but that's the way it's going to be. Alright, I've trimmed down this bracket assembly that holds the engine, and it's going to fit pretty nice on the tubing. I'll just have to make some new holes, drill straight through to attach it. And the hardest part at this point is just going to be getting the alignment on the sprockets. And basically I'll just take a straight edge and hold it up against the teeth here and bring it down and line it up with that. Otherwise, I think it's going to work. So now I have the base plate mounted, and just regular bolts, 1/2 inch head, and by using these with a little bit of length, if I need to, I can shim this up and down to compensate for any variance in the chain. If it's, you know, the link is a little too short or too long, I can make it the chain a little bit longer and bring this up a little bit with some washers and remedy that. So I'm going to get the engine mounted and start playing with the chain. Okay, so this is just a simple replacement chain I picked up at Walmart, and by lacing it, let's say, onto the sprockets, I know that I can't go any further or any tighter. It just won't stretch. And so this is the one it's going to interlock with. And by seeing that, I will have to shim this up a little bit, but I want to point this out because if you never messed with a chain before, I grew up building my own bikes and stuff at home, and this is your simple master link. You've probably seen these before, or if you haven't, this is how it operates. Because I have to remove this section of the chain, I have to grind off this pin where I marked in black, and then this master link is going to replace that and connect those two together. And then this little clip right here slides over that. So this clip will slide off of these pins. And so that's what I'll do. I'll grind that pin off and then swing this this outer piece out of the way, and it'll let it slide apart. And then I can come back with that master link. So there's what I did. I ground off basically half that link, and I was able to just pull this off of the other half just to show you. It just slips over that. So this part I'm not using. To show you how this master link works, this thing, you basically need to separate this like a clip. So I'm going to hook onto it and slide that up. I'll pick that up in a second. And then remove this shoulder piece, and then this piece will slide into the two ends of the chain. So if I can get this organized, so to show you, that's what I end up with. That's my chain, of course, and whoops. I can do this a couple different ways. I can come in from the back side, like if I rotated this down, I could hook into the lower piece and then come back into the upper piece, and by doing that it just puts the main assembly inside. And then I take this secondary plate, slip that over, and now that's connected. Now, let me grab that little clip. Now all I have to do is take this clip and slip it around that first pin, take my needle nose and catch the edge of it like this, and it's connected. And now you can kind of see, or maybe you can see if I back up, the slack in the chain. So it's just a little bit too much. If you can see, it's going to hit that. So I have to definitely shim this higher. And that's just going to be a few washers. Serious wheel wobble. Okay, so it's experiment time. I need to see if it has any power at all before I do anything else, like modifying the throttle control, you know, so it's on the handlebars, or even placing the seat. I just need to see if it can do anything. So I guess that answers that question. Well, that was a spectacular failure, but that's okay. I wanted to experiment and see if this would do anything as far as moving this tricycle, and apparently it doesn't have any power, or at least not enough to do something like this. So maybe I'll have to find another use for this engine. I don't know yet, but I'm not worried about it. My plan is I'm going to upgrade. Yep, I'm going to put a bigger engine on this thing. I think Harbor Freight sells a 79cc, I think it's 3.5 horsepower gas engine. That's what's going to happen. I'm going to put that engine on here, and that's going to make it move. Now, I don't need a great big engine because there's no reason or no need, or probably too dangerous to go very fast on this thing to begin with. And I just need something to make it move. And I think that'll do it. So that'll be the end of this video. And at least now you know that this little Edger engine isn't meant for anything that's going to require a lot of torque. And now I know too. So, as I said, that'll be the end of this video. I thank you for watching. Stay tuned for part 3. I'll get that into work soon. And if you would, leave a comment, like, share, all those things that help the channel grow. And until next time, take care of yourselves. Alright, so I have the base plate mounted, just for, you know, so like I said with the sprocket, well, normally like a go-kart, like I said, so there's what I did. I ground off basically half that length. Whoops. So let's try an experiment. I just want to see if it can move at all under its own power before I go so far as to rig up a throttle control on the handlebars, and then, you know, also I may need to now, of course, you don't learn anything unless you experiment. So what I'm doing here, I have it rigged up with just the